going thing.
Hello friends, and welcome to another class by Daily English Classroom. Today we are dealing with what is called a relative clause and what is a relative pronoun. And you know that clause is something in addition to a sentence which is not a complete sentence. So let's take this example, first example in your textbook. The small Texas school that I went to had a tradition carried out every year during the 8th grade graduation. In this sentence, a small part is already added to the main sentence. So in this sentence, the small Texas school had a tradition carried out every year during the 8th grade graduation is the sentence. Into that sentence, we add an additional information which cannot stand alone, that is called a clause. So here the clause is that I went to. The small Texas school that I went to, this part that I went to is a relative clause, and the rest of the sentence is had a tradition carried out every year during the 8th grade of graduation. So even if you remove this relative clause, the sentence is meaningful, like the small Texas school had a tradition carried out every year during the 8th grade graduation. We are adding an additional information, a clause into this sentence. This is the clause that I went to. And for every relative clause, we need to use a relative pronoun. A relative pronoun is a word that stands for the subject. So in this sentence, that is the relative pronoun. Let's take the next sentence. The student who had maintained the highest grades for 8 years was awarded the scholarship jacket. In this sentence, the actual sentence is the student was awarded the scholarship jacket. When we are adding what type of a student, so that is a relative clause. Who had maintained the highest grades for 8 years is the relative clause, and this relative clause begins with the relative pronoun who. And who, we are using so many relative pronouns like who, when, where, whose, which, but this one is not used in the sense of a question word. That's different. Where, here it is not used as a question word, but it is used as a relative pronoun, a sentence that connects another sentence which cannot stand alone. If you take just this part alone, who had maintained the highest grades for 8 years, the sentence is not complete. It has no clear meaning. So it cannot stand alone. It can stand in a sentence as an additional information, and for every relative clause there is a relative pronoun. You have to use the suitable relative pronoun in this sentence. So here the relative pronoun used is who, because this who is referring to a person. For a person we use the relative pronoun who. Now let's take the third example. My PE shorts were still in a bag under my desk where I had forgotten them. Where I had forgotten them is a relative clause, and it begins with the relative pronoun where, because where is a relative pronoun that shows a place or location. Who is referring to a person, where is referring to a place or location, that referring to a thing. And the next example, I was almost back at my classroom door when I heard voices raised in anger as if in some sort of argument. In this sentence, we have a relative clause, when I heard voices raised in anger as if in some sort of argument. And it begins with the relative pronoun when, because it shows the time. So we use these different types of relative pronouns accordingly, according to that sentence. If we are referring to a thing, we often use that. If we are referring to a person, we use who. whose, whom, etc. If we are referring to a location, we use the relative pronoun where, and if we are talking about some occasion or time, we use the relative pronoun when. In general, we have this much of relative pronouns: who, that, which, whose, where, and when. We use them according to the situation. Who is referring to a particular person, that is referring to a thing, not to a person, which is referring to a thing, and whose is referring to a possession, someone's possession, where is referring to a place or location, and when referring to a time period. So all you have to remember is that we can make relative clauses, add it to a sentence, and it should begin with a relative pronoun. There are so many relative pronouns. Sometimes this type of a question can come for editing the mistake. Instead of a person, we are using a wrong relative pronoun. So you have to change that pronoun and use the correct pronoun. So such questions you can expect for the examination. Okay friends, now let's see which are the important relative pronouns and how they are to be used. So generally we can divide the relative pronouns into two types. One is person, related to person or a human being, and the second one is related to non-human, or we can say things. And usually when we are using a relative pronoun, sometimes as a subject, sometimes as an object, and sometimes we use it in the possessive form. So for persons, generally we use the relative pronoun who. I told you already that this is the personal pronoun or a relative pronoun that we use for a person. So who, for example, the man who robbed has been arrested. So here who, this relative pronoun who is referring to the man or to a person. So here we have to use this relative pronoun who, not which or that, which we use with the things, because here we are talking about a person. So the relative pronoun that you can use here is who. The man who robbed has been arrested. Now when you are using this as an object, then you have to use whom. Let's take an example. The man whom you gave the car is my friend. Here whom you gave the car is the relative clause, and whom is the relative pronoun, and here it is used in the objective position. So here we use whom. And the third one, when you are using it in the possessive form, we use whose. The film is about a king whose ministers betray him. Whose ministers betray him is the relative clause, and whose is the relative pronoun, because it is referring to the possession of the king, the king's ministers. So whose ministers. And when we come to the things, when you are talking about things, we use certain relative pronouns, especially which and that. So just to remember who, whom, whose when you are talking about a person, and which and that, which or that when you are talking about a thing. This question may come for correcting the mistakes if there is a wrong pronoun is used. So you have to be thorough with this one. When you are talking about persons, we use who, whom, whose, and when you are talking about things, we use which or that. So this is the picture which caused a sensation. Which caused a sensation is the relative clause, and which is the relative pronoun. Here we used which, not who, because who is referring to a person. Here which is referring to an object or thing. Which here is referring to the picture. So which is the correct pronoun here. When in the object position, the car that I hired broke down. The car that I hired is the relative pronoun, and that relative clause, and that is the relative pronoun. It is used as an object. Then third one, this is an achievement of which I am proud. Which I am proud is the relative clause, and which is the relative pronoun. It is talking about an achievement, not about a person. So there we used which. Okay, so let's do some activities here. Complete the sentences using appropriate relative pronouns. So here are some sentences and you have to use the correct relative pronouns. Let's do the first one. Do you know the man dash climbed the mountain yesterday? Do you know the man? Here you have to use a relative pronoun. This is referring to a man, a person. So there you have to use the relative pronoun who. Do you know the man who climbed the mountain yesterday? Then second one, can I have the pencil I gave you today morning? Can I have the pencil? So here the relative pronoun is talking about a pencil, which is an object, not a person. So here you can use that or which. Both are correct, that or which. Can I have the pencil that I gave you today morning? Or can I have the pencil which I gave you today morning? Because here it is a thing we are talking about, and the relative pronoun which can be used here is which or that. Third one, a notebook is a computer dash can be carried around. A notebook is a computer. It's talking about a computer or an object. So here also you can use that or which. That can be carried around or which can be carried around. Okay, now let's go to the fourth one. I won't eat in a restaurant that dash is not clean. Here it is talking about a restaurant. So restaurant is an object or a thing. It's not a person, it's a thing. So there you can also use which or that. Again, which or that, both relative pronouns are correct. I won't eat in a restaurant which is not clean. I won't eat in a restaurant that is not clean. Both the sentences are right. Now fifth one, I want to live in a place dash there are lots of shops. So here is talking about a place, a location. So there you are using the relative pronoun where, W-H-E-R-E. I want to live in a place where there are lots of shops. Fifth one. Okay, fifth one is I want to live in a place where there are lots of shops. Then number 6. Yesterday was a day dash everything went wrong. Here we use the relative pronoun when because it shows about the time. Okay, so this one goes like this. Yesterday was a day when, relative pronoun is when everything went wrong. Then number 7, he is a teacher dash we all respect. Here it is referring to a person, and here we use it as an object. So he is a teacher whom we all respect. He is a teacher whom we all respect, because this is talking about a person. And the last one, he dash never climbs, never falls. Here we can use the relative pronoun who. He who never climbs, never falls. So this is how you use the relative pronouns. I hope you understood the difference between the relative pronouns that are showing a person, a relative pronoun that denotes an object or a thing. Okay, so thanks for watching, and if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do subscribe, and we'll be giving you more classes. So see you again in the next class. Thank you.